ABC News political director Rick Klein and White House correspondent Karen Travers to see what the future holds for this vision and this plan. The president, Karen, unveiling his $6 trillion budget today over on the Hill. So what's President Biden aiming for with this speech on this day when the sheer scale of his plan comes to the dollars and cents bottom line?
Terry, this was a sales pitch for the president. As you say, familiar remarks, a familiar sales pitch. Three different things here that the White House said that the president was going to highlight. One, the work his administration did to get the pandemic under control. You heard him there talking about the number of shots and the vaccinations and how things are getting back to normal because of his administration's efforts. The second thing is the economy. He said the Biden economy is working. His policies, he says, are working. So all of that is part of the patting himself on the back, but it leads into the sales pitch. The president, as you say, is rolling out a budget proposal and also pushing for his infrastructure plan. We heard the president there talk about getting good-paying jobs, union jobs, going to a place like Cleveland and talking about how important it is for an area like that, and then urging Republican lawmakers to get on board. Terry, you saw the president there at one point say that no Republicans in the House or Senate voted for his COVID relief package. He said he wasn't going to embarrass anybody by starting to name names, but noted that many of them are now back in their districts talking about what that legislation does, how it's helping their districts, whether that's small businesses or restaurants or schools getting back open. So it's part of that message where the president leaves Washington and uses local stories to put pressure on Republicans back on Capitol Hill.
And Rick, the president for a while now has been talking about the need for more investment in infrastructure and what he calls human infrastructure. So what stood out to you today? How do you think he's refining that message to try to sell this to the American people?
Two hallmarks, Diane: optimism and urgency. When you contrast a speech like this with what he was saying earlier on in this presidency in outlining the steps that had to be taken just to rescue the economy and to just heal the country, there's a bounce in his rhetorical step. And it comes through now when he talks about the successes in getting the economy moving and the urgency. When he talks about how big this moment is, there were some touchstones in this speech where he talks about the need to grow the economy from the bottom up and the middle out. Those are classic Bidenisms, and they're relevant now because he is talking about an unprecedented investment in spending at a pivotal point in his presidency where there are potential deals to be had. There's a proposal just offered by Republicans on infrastructure today that approaches $1 trillion. In any other time, that would be a big sum. It's not close to what Biden wants to spend, but it does suggest that there's something out there. So this is a critical moment going into this holiday weekend with that big budget proposal, with the president on the road. The potential for some deals are there. They just may not be the deals that Democrats want.
And Karen, let me follow up on what Rick was just talking about, this Republican counteroffer on the traditional infrastructure plan, if you will. Almost $1 trillion, once again, from Republicans. Is Biden really going to turn down the opportunity to sign $1 trillion in infrastructure spending because he wants a lot more?
Yeah, I mean, he wants $1.7 trillion. And Terry, the White House said today that they have concerns with some of the things that were crossed out from their proposal to this Republican counteroffer. $928 billion is a lot of money, and it addresses what the Republicans have said is hard infrastructure, fixing roads and bridges and mass transit, and also investing in broadband internet and electric vehicle infrastructure. These are all things the president wants to see. There are things, of course, in the Republican proposal. There aren't things there that the White House would like to see included. But, Terry, we were really struck today listening to the president talking to reporters before heading to Cleveland, listening to the press secretary on Air Force One. There is actually good conversations taking place right now. The president said that he liked what he saw, essentially. They were encouraged that the fact that Republicans came up substantially, in their view, with their overall price tag. The president next week is going to be having conversations with Republican lawmakers. But, Terry, he did say they have to finish this very soon. It gets to that urgency that Rick was just talking about. He is willing to keep engaging, but if they feel that the critical issues here of how a bill like this of nearly $1 trillion would be paid for, if they're still very far apart, look for the president to start moving on. He said at some point they're going to have to close it down.
Rick, so what does that mean politically? Because Biden ran on being a president that would work to unite the two parties, to create bipartisanship in Washington. We haven't seen a lot of that, though, during his presidency so far in terms of bipartisan legislation. So now that there is this potential for a deal to be made, can he afford to pass on this compromise if he wants to keep that reputation?
Yeah, Diana, look, it's a fascinating conundrum that confronts President Biden, because we're operating on these two different tracks legislatively. One of them is to try to pursue bipartisan compromise. And he has said that he's a little surprised by how little the Republican Party has moved, and mentioned fresh evidence about how in the thrall to Trump they remain. But he's also kept alive procedural options on Capitol Hill that allow Democrats to govern with the narrowest of majorities, with that 50-50 margin in the Senate and the tie-breaking vote, and just a couple of seats to spare in the House. So working on those two tracks, at some point you got to choose one or the other. And clearly there's going to be a cost by doing it. And now I think it's more stark than ever, not just on infrastructure, also on policing reform, where negotiations are going to extend through the holiday and into June. There are opportunities here, but it's going to mean seeing some priorities go by the wayside. And we've been waiting to see what direction this White House would go. And I think really the White House has been waiting to see what direction opens up to them. This is crunch time. This is the time where you're going to have to choose, if you're President Biden, do you take a smaller deal in the service of getting that money out the door and achieving a big bipartisan win in these polarized times, or do you hold out and see what you can do just with your own party? It's a fascinating moment right now in the arc of the Biden presidency.
It really is, and it does feel as if President Biden is very old school in how he's doing this. Very low-key talks, but trying to push towards his goal. Now, on the other story of the day, he's out there in Cleveland talking about the economy in the shooting in California. We're learning more about the 9 men who were killed in the mass shooting yesterday at that San Jose rail yard. Their co-workers honoring them at a vigil today. Take a listen.
We get up every morning, safe in the belief that when we go to work, that we would come home to our family and our loved ones. That did not happen for Adolfo, Adrian, Alex, Jose, Lars, Michael, Paul, Tapchadeep, and Timothy.
Those transit workers lost there in San Jose. And now the flags, as you see there at the White House, they're at half-staff once again after the latest mass shooting in our country. So, Karen, how is President Biden responding to this attack?
In a statement yesterday, Terry, the president said enough. He said again he had to order the flags lowered for yet another mass shooting, several that he's had to do just since taking office. But the president called on Congress to move forward on gun control legislation. And we heard from the press secretary today, Terry, a lot of questions about this, what the White House could be doing, what the White House should be doing. And their response is that there's an ongoing review of executive actions that the president could take on gun issues. But they've always acknowledged after every one of these shootings that it's really limited on what they can do. This has to be done through legislation. So that's why we see the president and White House officials say Congress needs to move. Congress needs to look at universal background check legislation. The White House does say, though, that they're continuing to do a very thorough and legal review of what options they might have, what the president could do himself. But, Terry, I think we've known from covering previous presidents who've tried to do the same thing, their options through executive action are really quite limited.
So, Rick, what are the chances that we see any movement from Congress on gun reform in light of not only this shooting, but the many that we've seen over the course of just this year?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those areas that a lot of Democrats have become frustrated. There are active discussions to try to move something forward, but the general consensus is that there's very little realistic prospect for that. And again, this still gets back to the earlier discussion, because the hope in this White House is that you can start the basis for bipartisanship, and that there's momentum that comes, one deal begets another. And if President Biden is going to leave a deal on the table on infrastructure, it makes it that much less likely that he's going to get anything on gun gun control. Maybe that would happen anyway. In so many ways, this should be a moment where you can have an open, honest, and full debate over gun control. We know that the National Rifle Association is politically weakened in bankruptcy court, never been at a lower point in modern history. Yet still, there's just a lot of resistance, sort of cultural resistance to new gun laws. So I don't see it happening now, but there's definitely efforts and urgency around that as well.
And we'll see where that goes. Rick Klein and Karen Travers, as always, thanks very much.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.